We welcome back to the show a favorite of mine, a woman who has not just the technical skill, but really a nice philosophical view of what it means to be a worker in today's environment. Miss Lisa Lorenzin, the Principal Solutions Architect from PulseSecure.net. Lisa, thank you very much for coming back.
Thank you for having me back.
Now, you have always had a very interesting view of the transition of the worker over the last, let's say, 2-3 decades. We started with this idea that everyone had to be inside the campus. You were inside the premise, and they put a big firewall against everyone, so you had the good guys inside and the bad guys outside, and that's how it was supposed to be, nice and simple. But that's changed over the last few generations. Can you tell me what we've seen?
Certainly. When I was working at Blue Cross Blue Shield, we all sat at our desk, we worked on a PC, and putting in wireless was, are we certain that we want to be broadcasting signal throughout the building? Somebody might sit in the parking lot. And those were legitimate concerns at the time, but I don't think we had any idea what was really coming at us, which is this migration of, initially you have remote workers, you need access after hours, you want to allow people to connect to a campus that they don't report to. So we start to have client to gateway VPN connectivity, and then you start to see guests coming into the environment. So you go from that initial environment where you've got the hard, crunchy exterior and the soft, chewy interior like an M&M, and you start to blend it. It used to be that everyone inside your firewall was trusted and anyone outside your firewall was untrusted. Then you start to see people doing work from outside the firewall, people coming into the environment that aren't employees. So you get this crossing of that boundary. And then smartphones and tablets happened, and that whole concept accelerated, got turned up to 11. So at this point, the perimeter of any network is, frankly, the perimeter of PulseSecure's network is my rooted Android phone. And as that perimeter moves, you were talking earlier about authentication, the ability to have a single identity and a single authentication that follows you through different environments. And that also carries the need for security policies that follow you through these environments as well.
Lisa, the interesting thing about that is we speak about it as a matter of fact. Yeah, of course, you've got mobile workers. People are going to work from home. They're going to VPN in. They're going to be at a cafe and be answering business emails. That's par for the course. But I'm going to date myself. When I started, you had to get extraordinary permission to be able to not be in the office, because there was this idea of, well, if I don't see you, then that means you're not working. And even for teleworkers, because we called them teleworkers back then because everything was over the telephone, but even for teleworkers, I remember there were these draconian policies in place so that your manager could actually tell that you were doing something, that you weren't just at home connected via modem and in your pajamas sipping coffee. And that is such a breakthrough. And we can look at it and we can laugh and go, look how silly we were. But here's the more interesting thing, and I think I'd really like to get your comment on this. We changed so much with what we believe is acceptable as far as working off the campus, off of premise. But a lot of our security models are still the old model. They still assume that the good guys are inside the walls. That's changed as well, yes?
Absolutely. I'm possibly the pathological case of this. The first thing I do in the morning is check my email. It's often one of the last things I do in the evening, although I'm trying to be better about that. And I'm much more likely to respond to an email, especially on a day that I'm traveling, which is, most of them, from my phone than from my laptop. And yet the amount of security and control that a normal enterprise has over that phone, that tablet, that smart device that we're doing all this on is so much lower than the amount of control that's applied to a traditional operating system, to a laptop or a desktop. I think that the extent of the security risks that are introduced by these mobile OSs and these mobile devices, every so often somebody leaves a phone in a taxi and it's not the end of the world, but pretty soon, I think you're going to see a large, like with this latest Android vulnerability, 950 million vulnerable Android devices, and all you have to do is send an MMS message to them. We need to be recognizing that we need to protect the data almost more so than the device, because endpoint security is a losing battle. You can never fully secure a laptop. You can't even think about fully securing a mobile device in most cases. So how do you protect the data on that device, and how do you ensure that the user who's making the connection is the user that you think it is? It really needs to be a shift in focus.
I like that. And actually, endpoint protection is a losing battle. I think that should be the mantra of every security professional today, which is, hey, guess what? This whole idea that you're going to stop the bad guys at some arbitrary line, that doesn't exist anymore. If the bad guys are inside the lines, you better start thinking in that way. In the same vein, we've been talking about how workers have been moving in and out of the perimeter. But there's another aspect to this, and that is the data itself has moved in and out of the perimeter. It used to be, again, back in the old day when I was grumpy and connected via a 300 baud modem through an acoustic coupler, the thing I needed was on a server on the company's campus in a basement somewhere, and I could only access it over that phone line, and when I disconnected, there was no trace of it on my local computer. We don't do that anymore. Not only are we going to have local copies on devices that are connected to networks, but the data itself is probably no longer just inside your campus. What has that changed in this whole security endpoint calculus?
That's really shifted how and where you can apply security policies. And it's also shifted what the baseline for connecting to this information should be. So, for example, I work for a company that makes SSL VPN gateways. And when the model is that all your data is on campus, it makes perfect sense to force everyone through a VPN tunnel to access that data. You need to protect the data in motion. But as that data migrates into a hybrid cloud or a software as a service provider, the data access is no longer between the user and a corporate data center. It's between the user and corporate data in this variety of locations with this variety of providers. So it doesn't necessarily make sense to make me hairpin through a VPN to corporate and then out to the provider. That's a waste of bandwidth at corporate, and it's probably applying dual encryption because all of that data should be running over TLS because it's 2015. If your software as a service provider isn't encrypting your web-based connection to them, they're going to be out of business momentarily. So we need to start thinking about contextual authentication and decoupling the two core concepts of a VPN, which are the connectivity piece and the encryption protecting that data in motion, from the authorization piece, which is whether the user is allowed to access that data in the first place. If I'm sitting inside an enterprise and I'm on a corporate desktop, then it's pretty easy to determine what my desktop is, what my platform is, whether it's compliant with security policies. If I'm at home and I'm accessing Salesforce or Google Docs or Office 365 or the zillion other software as a service options, there's a lot less control of the platform I'm accessing it from, and there's a lot less ability to control the traffic between me and that provider as well. So I think that security considerations need to start to think about encrypted tunneling as infrastructure. It's under the hood. We should be able to take it for granted. Now we have to be vigilant about that and make sure people aren't doing stupid things like, using poor choices of cipher suites or poorly implementing the encryption over those tunnels, or over which those tunnels run. But I do believe that the focus needs to be on figuring out how to extend authentication and authorization and compliance checking into all of the places that our data now lives. Contextual authentication and contextual authorization.